But this panel is about building Web3 with privacy by default. We touched on this a little bit earlier. I had a very strange experience recently with a friend of mine who had played in the Meme Queen casino, and let's say he made more money in a week than he'd made in a year in his job, and actually then became subject of a wallet drain. This was a guy very new to the space. He hadn't quite understood the dangers of what he was getting into, and was normally used to being able to pick up a phone and speak to someone in the event of a scam. He actually asked me how he would get in contact with the CEO of Solana to try and sort his issue out. And this is when we start to think about what we mean by privacy by default, and hopefully leading to a lively panel. So apologies for that. So I will be moderating again. First of all, we start to the left here, this handsome man that I actually met in Rome a few weeks ago. Maybe if you hand over and we introduce ourselves as a panel.
Nice to meet you guys. I'm Martin, DevRel at iExec. We are providing flexible solution for protecting data, managing it, and monetize it with the Web3 ecosystem. And when I'm talking about solution, it's developers' tools that leverage decentralized confidential computing, more especially TEE.
Hi, I'm Brian Norton, CEO of MyEther Wallet. For those who are not familiar, MyEther Wallet was the first wallet interface on the Ethereum blockchain. We launched 2 weeks after Ethereum went to mainnet. And since then, we have been working exceptionally hard to give our usership, our 3 million usership worldwide, the opportunity to experience all that's new in Web3. Whether that was DeFi, NFTs, and now giving them access to private transactions. So that's.
Thank you. My name's Josh Maddox. I'm CEPO of Coti, and we are becoming the privacy layer of Web3. We use a technique called garbled circuits, which currently today makes us the fastest and lightest Web3 solution in Web3. Essentially what that means is that you can start to do on-chain privacy with multiple parties at scale and cost efficiency for the first time at the smart contract level, which means you can bring your standard EVM contracts over, you can port those over, they work out of the box, and then you layer on whatever privacy features you want onto your existing smart contract. So easy, fast, and simple for people to get spun up and start leveraging privacy features on Ethereum.
Nice. I'm Dominik. I'm working on Polygon Miden, and basically we do client-side proofs. So we have an efficient way to for users to create proofs of their own state transition. So their state can be local or private, and not only the state but also the execution, and the blockchain doesn't know shit about anything. You do only a commitment. There's also public state, and then like Miden is especially about how can the private state interact with public smart contracts, and yeah, happy to talk more about it or about anything else.
Thank you very much. So one of the things we're facing at the moment in Bangkok is the traffic and people getting to things on time. So thank you for bearing with me while I got everything together, but hopefully it'll be very smooth running from here. So, big question. Web3 promotes transparency, yet privacy remains at its core value. How can developers reconcile these seemingly opposing goals in their projects?
Like transparency and privacy?
Yeah.
I think that's a super interesting one because, like as we know, normally blockchains, they verify, like they have this dogma, don't trust, verify. And blockchains were designed before the advent of CK, meaning that verification always needs transparency. Like I cannot verify someone else's transaction if it's not transparent. So I end up with pseudonymity. But with CK, I have a tool such that I can use this, or I can still stick to don't trust, verify, but now I can verify something with zero knowledge. And this is actually quite cool. So like you don't need to be transparent to be able to verify transactions. You need to have another state model, but this is, yeah. So you can solve this problem and still be trustless. Huh?
Yeah, I think for us, we follow the philosophy that it should be put into the user's hands and the developer's hands. So I think for people to be able to adopt privacy, they need to come with the same approach that they do in Web 2. And I, as the user, should have control over my data. And so you can make choices in on what you want to be transparent, what you want to be private, and then it's the job of developers to make sure that those experiences are, easy and fast for those users to be able to make those decisions for themselves. So, a great example would be about 2 years ago, one of my family members got my whole family passed a 23andMe, and I told my family we are not using this. And we were right to make that decision. You look at 23andMe, they're going bankrupt, and everyone is freaking out about their entire genetic data being put on chain. I, as the user, should always have control over whether my data gets leaked to the public. And I think, we really need to put the transparency, the anonymity, we don't do anonymity, but and privacy into the hands of the people who actually produce that data and own that data.
I absolutely agree with all that. I think that one of the fundamental things that, what privacy brings to the blockchain space is fundamentally like we're allowing users to kind of understand what that these two things are not in conflict with one another. That this can only enhance what we can do, and therefore it reveals to more to the ecosystem as a whole more data. It actually ironically provides us with more data because we're getting more data about user behavior and not necessarily users' identities, not users individual, not their metadata, none of that. And so we're actually, the more users feel protected, the more transparent they're free to be on chain. And so, I mean, that's that's what fundamentally excites me as somebody who is servicing retail users. It's that I'm providing them that safety to go like that extra step, explore that extra thing, that new thing, knowing that they're safe.
Just to be sure that I get the question, can you repeat slowly? You've got a strong accent.
You're not the first person to say that. Yeah, Southeast London. But anyway, I'm a bit posher now, so I live in the countryside, so hopefully it's softened a little bit. But just for you, I will repeat because there's a lot going on. So Web3 promotes transparency, yet privacy remains a core value. How can developers, from the developer side of things, reconcile these seemingly opposing goals in the projects that they're building?
Yeah, I think there is an ethical implication in it that there is a kind of duty for developers to build with privacy, and as privacy rely on security, we need to build security project by design, and there is a lot of challenges to tackle, and I think for TE, because we are working with TE and we are enabling builders and end user to keep control over their data through the entire life cycle. So, and I think it's the same for every technology. There is a lot of challenge. So, yeah, we need to find a kind of middle ground between a right balance between transparency and privacy. And I think it's best through first educate people to really understand what is privacy. Because I think I've got plenty of my friends that always say, I have nothing to hide. And there is a really cool documentary about it. Like, we always have something to hide because there is a bunch of data, and as soon as our data is controlled by someone, they can use it against us. So, yeah. I don't know if it answers the question, right?
I think it answers the question fairly well, to be fair. It's an interesting point that you're making. I think as users, people need these seamless experiences. I think, when I first was asked to pay someone in Bitcoin, I paid a graphic designer to do some work for me, and he wanted just to be able to receive Bitcoin because he was curious about it. And this was about 7 years ago. I installed a wallet on his laptop for him, and as an Apple Mac user, he immediately wanted me to delete it and asked me for a bank transfer because he felt that he was going to get some sort of virus on his computer. We see this sort of fast forwarding that we want that Apple Mac type experience, we want that Apple type experience for users. So with that in mind, thinking about the overall experience of sort of back end and front end, how do we envision Web3 evolving to make privacy a seamless but invisible part of the user experience rather than a burden? And we all know what we mean by burden, you know, something that's a pain in the backside, like when you have to connect in a certain way. So what innovations can we see coming that help build that seamless experience?
I think initially, while ideally this is going to be just abstracted away from the user, they're not going to see it. But I feel like, particularly for new users coming in, there is a certain degree of education that needs to be like communicated to them that this is in fact private. Because it's not only just like privacy by default also implies that, you know, you have the freedom to disclose. And knowing that they have that, like giving users that knowledge that there is that freedom there, but they have to do it. Like that is proactive on their part. There's also the fact that, you know, some people, I know when I first got into the space, my first transactions, and I going onto Etherscan the first time, I'm like, oh, well, I can't find it. So I'm assuming nobody else can find it either. I don't know what this means. And then there being just that little shock to the system, like, no, there are people who can. And now that I am one of those people, I know what people, that people have reason to be scared of me. And so I do feel like initially, pushing forward like privacy as a value proposition is going to be really beneficial for the ecosystem before we can actually start pulling it back.
And it's interesting you say that as well, because, you know, we did use the Apple Mac analogy, and I'm not going to labor it, but if you look at virus protection in Apple compared to PC, we'll have an argument about both sides of that philosophy, but actually as a PC user, you can decide who you're using, right? You decide that you're happier with Norton than, McAfee or whatever, right? So it's becomes part of your choice. If I look into this and I have my Android loading screen, it says secured by Knox, right? It gives me that level of protection. And actually as a consumer, you're free to understand. So there is an element of education. Does anyone else want to add to that question?
I think we need to, like, it would be perfect if we would have like a signal-like experience, right? So if people know it is private, but it touches and feels like WhatsApp. But I think there are several problems that we have to overcome for this. And but I think as long as privacy is not as easy to use as a normal thing or as cheap, then people just won't do it. And like the problem is, like with transparent blockchains like Ethereum, when we want to add privacy to it on top, then it will always be the more clunky and more expensive solution. Like we cannot, like we need to hide data away or need to hide the transaction graph away afterwards, and this is just way more gas expensive. And so it could be that we need to redesign blockchains in a way, like, or it could be like we find other solutions to that. But I think as long as it's not as easy to use as a normal transaction, then people won't just do it.
Yeah, I think we could completely agree with it having to be easy, fast, and cheap. And that's one of the reasons we became an L2 on Ethereum, because you're right, you can't do this on Ethereum. With garbled circuits, because of the speed and the lightness, you can now do this on an L2 at speed and cost efficiency on any device. And I think for people to be able to adopt it, we have to work with the interfaces. So we recently announced a partnership with MyEther Wallet. We spoke with them, we were really excited to partner because MyEther Wallet's point of view was we have to approach the user experience. And until we think about the user experience and how people are going to come through the interfaces in which they sign transactions, in which they onboard into Web3, which is primarily going to be wallet experiences, we're just not going to get anywhere at all. It doesn't matter how fast and cheap it is if people can't easily use it. So I think people like MyEther Wallet, who have 3 million users, other wallet providers to come on and start paving the way for what the standards are for privacy transactions, putting control in the hands of users. And also, there's a big question over how many transactions are not done because of lack of privacy. So I can't think of there's been a lot of times where I've gone to do a transaction and maybe I'm on the wrong device and I have a wallet that I don't really want people to see my other tokens that are in that wallet. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not gonna do this transaction. So there's also, I think, like a whole slew of other transactions and onboarding experiences that can happen once the user understands that, oh, I can do this privately, I can do this with the same wallet that I've got other things in, and it has to be done with people like my Ether wallet.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear. We were the pursuers there, but it's exactly for that reason. The user experience, like, you promoted the value proposition of private transactions, and then you give them the ease, the low cost, and the speed of an efficient Ethereum L2, and that is how you bring people in. That is like it looks and feels like the thing I'm used to, but it's private.
Yeah, about the UX experience, I totally agree with you guys. As we are using complex technology as T, and we are making our best to simplify and abstract this technology and enable builder to use it. But I've got a quick question for you, Brian, because you, if I remember, you told that we should hide the fact that the app we are using is private and things like that. And I don't really get why, because in contrary, I think it can be a marketing, on the marketing point of view, it can be really interesting to show that in the UX and you are using something that is private and your data will be encrypted end to end, even if even in the use we are protecting data in use. So we should not hiding that, and I would like to have your thought about it.
I think if I understand the question, it's like why do we want to put that that out in front of people? Why do we want to make that so overt? And I think it's on the last panel there was some discussion about how we should blame and shame those who are not making protocols private by default. And I think that that's going to be part of it, but the network effects around privacy are going to come from the fact that users are excited about privacy, they're seeing privacy, and now they're coming to expect it. Like, now that they know, now that if the user is aware that this is private and it functions the way they've come to expect, that in a way that they get excited about, and it enables new use cases, then they are going to demand. We up here, us the converted, can blame and shame. I've been blamed and shamed for all sorts of things. I haven't done shit. Yeah, I mean, like shame is effective, but it's not enough. You need that. You need the network effects to like coalesce around privacy, and so that the competition just has to jump on board or they get left behind. And I think that's the primary reason you want to put that in front of the user. Did I do it?
Yeah, good point, thanks.
I mean, I love it when we start getting into these discussions in panels, and it almost makes your next question irrelevant. I'm not joking there. That's the beauty of when we get smart people together, that we get to the right answers very quickly. I'm interested to sort of think a bit more about, okay, so we're making privacy as default. As we know, there are various approaches to privacy or how this can run. We're going back to this education thing again, and I know we made comments about educating people on consumer apps, but we do need to educate people on consumer choices. So what role do you think that is by embedding this as default? And what work do we need to do to get people to sort of understand the difference between TEs and FHEs, for example? Or do they need to know that, or do they just need to know the benefits?
I think the educating the user, as the last panel said, is like that needs to be available to the people who want that education, but it's not going to work to educate the user. Like, no one goes on to Web2 and wants to dive into which RSA key that Google Cloud versus AWS are using. When you go on to your medical app, You don't want, the first 3 or 4 pages, the first 3 or 4 pages to be like, do you want to use Google Cloud or AWS, and which RSA key would you like to use? Here are the pros. No, I just want to log in, make my doctor's appointment, and trust that that information is safe and that my daughter's medical data isn't going to get leaked online. And so I think you just have to go in, make the user experiences as seamless as possible, and then there needs to be a way for those users to access the information for the maybe like 0.05% who actually want to be educated.
I would also say, like, you don't need to educate users. Like, if someone doesn't care, then doesn't care. But like, it's more, you need to convince them by features. Like, for example, private accounts or accounts where the blockchain only knows the commitment of, they are just way harder to hack, right? So at the moment on Ethereum, I can like look basically which account is loaded, and then I don't know, I can try to hack it, or like I can try to hack the bridging account, or like some liquidity pools. But like if you have a private blockchain, meaning that also the accounts are off-chain, then they are super hard to hack. And even if you would know how to hack it, you need the latest state to hack it. So like this is a feature that privacy brings that could convince people who do a liquidity pool, or and it's not only about the privacy, it's just they are more secure. And the same is like privacy just scales better. Like if you have a blockchain that doesn't store the whole state on chain, they don't run into execution and state bloat. So people will see, okay, I use this blockchain and I can get really high throughput. Like because privacy is a cool feature, but just my blockchain scales way better, and then you can build other applications. And this is like, I think, like the benefits, but yeah, education, I think, will not be the thing.
I think there's a difference between education and awareness, and we often see banks will lead an advert that says, this is how we keep you safe. These are the steps, or you can get those emails, how to stay safe online. Your bank does that as a bit of a mitigating problem, because actually if you look at a lot of online banking, hacks, etc., it's usually by users leaking data. So they know not to store their passwords somewhere, a bit like we've been educated from day one as kind of leading the charge that you don't leave your private key on a Gmail account, for example, unless you want to do a sort of public hack where you pretend your wallet's been drained for tax reasons. But it becomes down, I think it's differentiating between it, and actually consumers are aware, but also there's a constant reminder from the industry, this is why it exists, and this is what we're doing, and this is how we're improving.
Yeah, I think that the extent of education just needs to be like, this is private and this is not, and this is why it's private, and this is why this is beneficial, in this particular scenario, and why this particular use case may not call for privacy, that privacy might not be desirable for whatever reason, but if you're looking for that, that's where it is. Because education, it used to be, in Ethereum, they used to say, oh, education is the best marketing. And I would be like, well, then why do universities have marketing departments? It doesn't sell itself. I just think educating the user, I want people to come on my Ether wallet and know, okay, if I'm going to be transacting here, it's not going to be private. Do I need it to be private? Do I need it to be Ethereum based? Do I want this to settle to Ethereum? So I go to Coti. Do I want just a straight private transaction for whatever reason? EVM doesn't matter. Then I'll choose Fira. I'll choose something. Choose another private blockchain. So they know that what they're choosing is actually going to fulfill their goals on chain, and it's not going to disclose what they don't want disclosed.
There we go.
Yeah, in my opinion, as a tech privacy provider, we've got two education jobs. We need to educate builders, and they need to have a good understanding of our tech if we want them to trust our technology. Then we need to educate the end user, and end user, in my opinion, they don't need to know how our tech is working. Like when you are using internet, you don't need to know how work HTTPS. So first we need to educate builders, and then builders will educate, I hope, end user.
Yeah, exactly that. We're running up into time now. I think really good panel. And like I said, I'm always in a great position where we've actually answered some of my advanced questions. We're just going to hand over now to see if any burning questions from the audience. and I'm going to have to keep it super brief on the answers, but yes.
Thank you. I would like to ask you about, the panel discussed a little bit about privacy and transparency. We don't want to lose that. But one thing I think in that angle is that compliance. So what do you think about compliance in that angle? So the triangle that could be created Maddox if you comply with government.
Yeah, I think compliance has to be there for it to be adopted. It's one reason why Coti isn't anonymity, we're privacy. And then we put the ability in the app developers' hands to decide which frameworks they need to be compliant with. So out of the box, we don't force you to be like GDPR compliant or HIPAA compliant, but we should, as a layer 2, enable you to do that. And if you can't do that, you're not going to get mass adoption. I know some people feel that like compliance and regulations are at odds with privacy and like cypherpunk values and Web3 values. I don't think they are if they're implemented correctly and you're putting the choice into the developers' hands and the developers are putting the choice into the user's hands. Now, if you take shortcuts and you don't let the user decide whether their data to be compliant, that's a different matter and that's a problem. So I think you have to start by enabling people to be compliant. And you can do that on Coti. You can be HIPAA compliant, GDPR compliant, AML compliant, but we don't force it.
Enough time for another answer?
You've got 20 seconds and I bet you can do it.
Yeah, 20 seconds. I think I was thinking about yesterday, there is a trilemma in blockchain. And I think in privacy, there is a quadrilemma, like the builder, the end user, the compliance, and the tech privacy provider. And we all need to make some trade-off if we want to go to the mass adoption.
Very good closing remark. I think a warm round of applause for our wonderful panel here. I'm sure they're ready to answer any questions if there's anything burning over. I do need to move to the next one.